Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend, Ed Rosa.
That's me. Hi. My filmmaking partner and I have a YouTube channel, Toothless Richard Productions, where you can see a number of our short films.
Part 1 focused on Prano Baily-Bond's Censor. Part 2 focused on Mike Nichols' Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Part 3 focused on Brian DePalma's Greetings. Part 4 focused on Gordon Flemyng's The Split. Part 5 focused on Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Part 6 focuses on Gary Marshall's 1984 coming-of-age story, The Flamingo Kid, the first PG-13 rated movie.
The Flamingo Kid is a chunk of the story of the life of Jeffrey Willis, played by Matt Dillon, who is a young adult in the summer of 1963, and he gets a job at a beach club where he befriends a man, Phil Brody, played by Richard Crenna.
In the opening of the movie, it's kind of credit sequence, we get this snapshot of the Brooklyn neighborhood where our boy Jeffrey comes from. Storefronts, apartments upstairs, this kind of a situation. He's got an intact family with a working-class father who is a plumber. He's got this domestic goddess mother figure. He's got a sister who's in the household. They all seem to have separate bedrooms, and as somebody who's lived in New York, that means they're living pretty well.
Right.
They have a piano in the living room. They've got a television. They're doing fine. Mm-hmm. The point of this digressive statement is that he's just graduated high school. He's thinking of his future. His father has arranged for him to have an office job for the company where he does the plumbing. Jeffrey's willing to do this until he gets a glimpse of what it might be to run a different kind of a life. Thus, we have this father dynamic you're talking about, which becomes quite telling because his father, Jeffrey's dad, Mr. Willis, Arthur, is played by Hector Elizondo.
Yes.
He's always marvelous. And
yes.
He always shows up in the totality of Gary Marshall's career as filmmaker, and he is the filmmaker here. Hector's always got a job. We see that
really?
Always. And he's very good. He's a sympathetic man with a wonderful voice, and he clearly aspires to the thing that most post-World War II adults aspired to, which is bootstrap your children on the heels and the back of your own hard labor and effort. Mm-hmm. Make them better. Jeffrey has all of this going for them. But, okay, another little quality. In that sequence, when we see the neighborhood in Brooklyn, there is a good humor man who's waving off the heat, sitting on his truck. Yep. And there's a guy sucking on a Coke bottle with a girl, and they're necking, making kisses.
Yeah.
That guy is Nick Villalonger, who is the guy whose life story turned into the movie Green Book, which is set in roughly the same moment of the early 1960s.
Second worst Best Picture winner since Crash, right? Also starring
I suppose
Matt
that's
Dillon.
possible. And it's right. and there's a way that's a pleasing movie. But when I started putting together these little clues, my frame of reference for the Flamingo Kid turned into a sociocultural exercise. So here's a couple of notes. This movie spans July 4 through just after Labor Day in September of 1963. Right. In the deep background, we know that the Cuban Missile Crisis has just ended. We know that the police force of American service members who were in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, is about to ramp up. Mm-hmm. And we're a few months from JFK being assassinated. In other words, we're in peak Camelot, and things seem to be okay. There's a lot of civil rights agitation, and that set of laws and revision of the sort of federal governmental system wouldn't happen until 1965. And interestingly, there is one key black character, a friend of Jeffrey's who he meets at the beach club, who parks cars with him. Yeah. And that's Leon Robinson, who you may know as a character actor from a whole bunch of other things, and his character's name is Fortune. Another note, the rich family he becomes attached to, Crenna's character, and that is
the Brodies. The
Brodies live in this. Jeffrey drives up to this thing. How many families live here? He asks his friend who's in the know. And they have a black cook and housekeeper, Lizzie. Also, because these are people who live in the Rockaways, that's a neighborhood both of Brooklyn and of Queens, depending on where you hit it.
Yeah, I only knew it from the Ramones song, Rockaway Beach.
Jeffrey and his friends, he's trapped between the working class boys he grew up with, who are all of them aspiring to work at the A&P down the way, I work in the dairy section this summer, making a career of it. He doesn't want that life. and these up-jumped guys who are a year or two ahead of him who are bouncing around colleges because they come from means. They joke about failing out and dropping out. And they bounce around different parts of New York City. They go up to Yonkers, to the racetrack,
right,
to bet on a sure thing, which isn't.
Of course.
This movie is really, really specific to its time, and the lack of sophistication of this working-class, white ethnic kid Jeffrey, who's going places. That arc was, in the middle 80s, a popular one.
Right.
Stand By Me, which
right,
I think is also said
right,
in the early 60s.
Very late 50s. In fact, there's a couple of songs
Benny King,
on
Stand
both
By Me shows up.
As a young kid, I had the Stand By Me soundtrack, which was disappointingly short. Clocked in like 13 minutes for the whole album.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see.
But yeah, both films do share some songs on the soundtrack.
And I can recall looking through my parents' photo albums of their youth, and a lot of the fashion looks correct.
As you stand by me.
The cars look correct. The props look correct. The set design
Yeah, the
looks
mid-century
correct.
architecture, in particular Richard Crenna's little tiki bar at home, I was quite jealous with his Lowenbrow on tap.
Have you got a Heineken?
I got Lowenbrow.
Miller or something?
I got Lowenbrow.
A note that comes from this beer is an awareness of there being products from the wider world, the post-World War II world, that are desirable to this sudden influx of wealth in the American economy, particularly for those people involved in sales.
Mm-hmm.
So this movie's got an overlap with The Graduate. The adults in The Graduate are pitching to Dustin Hoffman's character, Benjamin, plastics, that's the future. Sales, that's the future. Everybody's a little bit grubby. Dollars are always attached to things that you consume. That's all Brody's all about in this piece. I could sell this car for $10,000. 2 cars will make my nut for the month.
Right.
What does a guy make with $50,000 a year? He only earns $20,000. It's a constant stream of awareness of what things cost and where that will get you. Another level, because recently I read for the first time in my life The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. We're watching Mrs. Brody, and she's gloriously played by Jessica Walker, who's just kind of in the background. As gorgeous as a middle-aged woman can possibly be, she's always been gorgeous, even as an octogenarian before her death. A gorgeous woman.
On Arrested Development.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's playing this really sort of salty, bitter woman. She's a kept woman. She has no independent life aside from being a trophy for her husband. Her job is to sunbathe in her bikini, keep up that tan, order people around, and drink.
There you are, Mrs. Brody. Straight vodka on the rocks in a wine glass. Is there anything else you'd like me to get you?
A gun.
Dissatisfaction with upper middle class into upper class life, which is embodied by the Brodys, is in contrast with the Willis household, where we have a very stable, seemingly loving family. It's paternalistic. Dad sets the rules, and that's part of what Jeffrey's bridling against. Dad, I want out. I don't want your path. But there's love, and there's affection, and there's unity.
Right.
All of these notes set a context. But in terms of our time together, pulling this one off the shelf, we're doing it because of ratings.
Yes, that's right. Because this is, or was, the first, as far as we can tell, the first film to receive the PG-13 rating.
And as I understand it from the little bit of research I've done, and some historical memory, because I was alive paying attention to all of this at the time, the movie was intended to become a summer release, but got delayed. That delay kind of hurt it, I think, in a lot of ways.
I would imagine this is exactly the kind of movie you would want to be released during the summer.
You drop this on kids getting out of school in June.
Yeah.
So the horny older kids are going to go, ooh,
yeah,
people in swimsuits, let's go hubba hubba. But instead it becomes a Christmas release. But let me ask, straight up, what are the elements of this movie that earn the PG-13?
There are 2 F-bombs.
I'm going out of my fucking mind.
You know you have a big fucking nose?
We see at the beginning in a way that kind of makes you think that this is going to be some kind of sexually charged melodrama. We see Matt Dillon, and maybe it's just like sort of a way to acknowledge, you know, his class, the class stratification or something. We see him ogling one of the girls in a bikini, and we get like a close-up of her thighs.
We see through the crack between her legs when she turns, so we're very aware of the pudenda, but it's behind clothing.
Well, it was exceptionally tame. And then there's a scene where he gets it on with
Janet Jones's character, Carla.
Yes, and the camera is sort of panning up her bare legs, and then as soon as her ass is going to be in frame, crossfade to something that doesn't show any, right?
Yeah.
And so it seemed to me they were very keenly aware that they didn't want to show anything too over the top. During that scene, I'm like, okay, here's where this film is going to earn its PG-13. Nope.
There were two additional things about it that struck me as funny, very funny at this age, which I'm sure alarmed the ratings board back then. One is, very early on, there's a pointed joke, as we're just learning the Brooklyn milieu that our character comes from, about masturbation.
So, what do you got planned for the 4th of July, Jeffrey? Jack off on the stoop?
And then later on, when Jeffrey is taken to the house of the Brodies, his buddy, it's Steve, right? His buddy Steve takes him to the house. Steve is involved with the Brodies' daughter.
Right.
Who's played by an English model. Joyce is the character's name, played by Carol Davis. Well, when dinner's done and the folks excuse him from the table, we get a nice meet cute as Jeffrey and Carla walk the grounds. It's this palatial estate. There's a big fountain in the middle, which is important symbolically. And meanwhile, in the back of the convertible, Steve and Joyce, they're doing it.
Joyce, you're hurting me.
Oh, come on, firm up.
What we see is her legs flopped over the back of the seat, and when we get the moaning that inevitably accompanies things, they're over there. We can't see their activity. We can hear it.
Right.
And then in the ultimate shot, go to the spurting fountain. It's just straight out of Naked Gun in that way. But the censorship board wouldn't be decommending this movie because of its symbolism. It would be because of its overt language.
Right.
There is no violence to speak of.
There's a punch up in a burger joint.
And you get that on Happy
tame.
Days.
Yeah.
Happy Days would be a reference for this because, of course, Gary Marshall was aware of that program, and that's how he helped cut his teeth a little bit. So I was totally off balance.
Yeah.
Waiting for something incredible to happen because I was not allowed to see this movie when I really wanted to.
It's bananas because it really is so tame.
It is tame. In subsequent years, I would see other sex comedies of this time that were considered hard R, and when you review those movies, I think one was called My Tutor. They deserve their hard R.
Right.
It's people walking around nude, talking very specifically about the plumbing of sex.
Right.
Using a lot of coarse language. But this really, when you peel it back, is a pretty sweet narrative, a coming-of-age story. The boy leaves home, discovers that the world looks great until he learns that it's not as great as it once looked, and he returns home.
Right.
That's it. That's the whole. That's the gist of this thing.
Yeah.
And it all takes place around this sort of spectacularly beautiful area of Long Island in the Rockaways. I kept waiting for the nude stuff.
Right.
I kept waiting for the predatory mother, which would have been great.
Yeah,
for Jessica
absolutely.
Walter.
That's what I want. In fact, okay, so this is going to be about him banging Jessica Walter and she's married. Oh, no, not that. Okay, this is going to be somebody's getting shipped off to Vietnam.
Right.
Okay, wait, no, that's not happening.
That would be American Graffiti.
Here's his black buddy. This is going to be some issue with, race. No, that's not happening. There is no major drama like that in this film at all.
And I know this movie can be commended for denaturing those potential conflicts and just making it kind of a normal environment. These young men, all of them white except for Fortune, they accept Fortune. Nobody says anything that's racially insensitive to him. When the gang goes out to the racetrack, Fortune loses all of his money, which he's saving for college so he can go off to Notre Dame and be a basketball player and have a good future. They rumble with another group of young men, but nobody is calling one another out for this or that based on their race or ethnicity. Right. One of those young men happily is John Turturro in an early performance.
Yeah, I noticed that in the credits too.
That becomes sort of a joy to see some of the name performers we now recognize today in the background. Stephen Weber's on screen. Marissa Tomei is on screen. I didn't notice her.
I didn't either.
And Bronson Pinchot is in this thing, and he's playing a grubby jerk. Right.
Yeah.
So these young people all look correct. They're all roughly the right age, and they're all dealing with things that in an ideal world we hope all young people go through. You got parents. They can be your natural parents or other parent-like guardian characters, but it's a loving home. And you want to break away from that because you want to stretch your wings.
Yeah.
And you're given a little bit of space to do that with some guidance, but you shirk the guidance, sure that you know what's best for yourself, and you realize, hey, my elders weren't so dumb after all. And the end. The bad guy doesn't get a huge comeuppance. The bottom line is that Brody, he's crafty, manipulative, and out for number one, himself.
Right.
He sees in this young man, Jeffrey, the opportunity to create a mentee he can bring up in the art of the steal, more or less. Mm-hmm. But Brody cheats at, what's the game they play?
Gin.
At gin. He cheats at gin using signals from a buddy of his. Who's kind of
Big
this,
Sal.
Who's this big hairy guy who rubs his nipples.
Who's constantly wiping sweat from underneath his breasts. Which I was like, okay, that's a fun detail.
Maybe that's why it's a PG-13 movie.
It could be, because he was like, no, kids are going to be harmed intellectually or psychologically by seeing this horrifying man drying his tits.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you're right. It's funny you put it that bluntly because it's really alarming when you focus on that for a second.
Yeah. Well, and he's exceptionally, hirsute as well. He's you know what I mean? He's a very hairy man.
Yeah. There are other nice notes which pleased me a lot, and that is these characters are very, it's town and country. The town folks are speaking with some version of a Brooklyn accent, with the exception of Hector Elizondo is not playing Jeffrey's dad, Arthur. He's doing something else because he's got this glorious voice. But the folks off at the country club, the beach resort, they're more polished people. They're richer. They have a membership. There are these signs throughout. Members only doing this, members only doing that. Jeffrey's hired because he can fix a broken-down car that's gumming up the works of the valet service. Once he arrives and meets Brody, Brody quickly promotes him to be a cabana boy, bringing drinks and towels to all of the hoi polloi hanging out at the local pool. And along with that, he's able to get closer and closer to Carla, who is the niece of the Brodys, visiting for the summer, and she's a UCLA student 1 year ahead of him. Played by Janet Jones, who at the time I think was intending to build a career as a model and or actress, and I think she explored both of those things through the 1980s until she met and married Wayne Gretzky and became Gretzky's wife. And his career has overmatched hers, and they were things, but I recall her being part of the selling point for this movie, including and introducing Janet Jones credit in the opening crawl. She was the big hook. These other performers, including Matt Dillon, our lead, were known. Richard Crenna had a long career, but the hook is this new young starlet.
Which is so weird because her character is very, peripheral. Mm-hmm. If you could come up with another way to get him introduced to the family, you could cut her out of the script entirely. And I'm not suggesting that they should have done that, but I'm just saying you would think if they were sort of going to the trouble, if they were making it a deal, hey, introducing this girl, she's going to be a big deal, that her character would have been more pivotal to the story. So
she's there as a kind of Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. Drawing talent.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the most non-judgmental or non-cruel way possible, because this may not be understandable to a contemporary reader and listener to our conversation, but the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue was a kind of soft-core porn that mainstreamed the idea of ogling scantily clad but covered women.
Right, yeah, and it was, I guarantee, it was the best-selling issue of
every
Sports
year.
Illustrated every single year. It used to be, I haven't heard about it in... I haven't thought about the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue for decades since you brought it up, but it did used to be
it was a big deal, and it was generally condoned in maternal and feminine circles as a tolerable way for men and boys to look at a certain kind of vital, healthy, traditionally organized, beautiful young woman. Playboy would often be too far away.
Right.
The Larry Flint publications, that was way a bridge too far.
Yeah.
But you could deal with Sports Illustrated's swimsuit issue. And I point that out because Janet Jones does indeed spend a lot of this movie as Carla in various forms of undress, whether that's swimsuit or sports attire, whacking tennis balls, jumping into pools, standing around and drying her hair, or else she's in dinner attire attending meals. She's sweet to Jeffrey because he's got this funny character flaw, which is endearing, and it made me laugh several times over while watching it because he has two sequences in which we watch Jeffrey have a meal.
Right. Yeah, that was funny.
The first he's with his family, but he hums while he eats. His dad calls this out and says, son, you've been doing this since you were 2 years old. Cut to later in the piece, he's invited to the Brodies, and they serve this beef Wellington meal. He doesn't know what he's looking at.
Yeah.
And he begins to. Carla says,
Jeffrey.
So she's sweet,
right,
and is helping educate him, which seems to be her main role. And, of course, she gets one over on him and draws him to bed. They make love. Now, is there a way to make this movie in no way challengeable as a PG-13 movie? Oh, yes. You simply can cut out the sex scene with that horizontal pan of their body. You can remove it, because what we get afterwards is the conventionalized look of some post-coital lovers in bathrobes smoking a cigarette.
Right.
These young people don't smoke cigarettes, but they talk about their future. We don't need to see them in any kind of... because we know what's happened. Remove that 20 seconds, and you remove that threat to conventional morality. You remove the sequence of watching Joyce and Steve get it on in the back of a convertible way off in the darkened distance of a long scene. Really, you just remove the dub track.
Right.
You can easily remove the big fucking nose.
Right.
And you don't need the comment about masturbation up front.
Right.
And then what you're left with is a slightly hyped up version of Head of the Class.
Yeah.
Or 8 is Enough when the kids go to the beach.
Yeah.
That's all this ends up being.
I swear at the beginning it says like an ABC motion picture or something like that, and I'm like, wait, like ABC the network? Like, was this actually made for TV?
I think it was a subsidiary. It's a good point. They also did after school specials, which very often were talking about how a young person grows to maturity without getting those nasty VD or whatever it might be about the boy who becomes a dad and how he gets through high school while caring for his child. It fits in with all of that groove.
Yeah.
Through the course of it, though, we also realize that this young person, Jeffrey, he has gifts. He's meant to go into engineering or a science. That's what his dad's goal is, because he's good with numbers.
Right.
Because he can do all the computation necessary to win at gin. He can card count.
Yeah.
He can anticipate things. He understands how to deal with probability. All of his friends are amazed, including the sort of glue friend, Fisher Stevens, who plays a character named Hawk.
Yeah.
Fisher Stevens is now, I think, most notable for being a filmmaker and TV maker, but he was this, I think, comer in the early 80s, a stand-up comedian turned actor. He's recognizable as a type. But Jeffrey's brought into this world. He's invited to go to this resort because they know he's good at gin. They want a third to finish their team and beat some other rich kids out of their money. The important point of that is Mr. Brody is also a great gin player who runs the summer, beating up on the other rich men who were there. So they're into each other for thousands and thousands of dollars. And the penultimate scene of the movie is Jeffrey sitting in for one of the thirds on the team opposite Mr. Brody.
Right.
And Jeffrey's wicked gifts destroy Mr. Brody and cause everybody to get leveled and nobody loses any money.
Yeah.
Then the ultimate scene is he returns to his family, embraces his father, and all is well. Jeffrey's learned his lesson.
Yeah.
The rich folks aren't all that great all the time, and maybe you should fall back on your plans to go to Columbia.
Yeah, right.
Rather than Pratt Institute in Brooklyn.
Yeah, just stay in your lane, kid.
Yeah, and pursue a career becoming an educated person before you become the salesman or whatever. This movie's ultimate conclusion is fulfill the middle-class dream of becoming an educated, smart, capable young person who can rely on his family. Always boys first, girls are less important. But do that, and you'll make it, youngster.
Yeah.
You'll get through these tumultuous 60s and do well.
One thing that was interesting about it, Jeffrey, he's trying to sort of fly the coop a bit at home, but he finds Phil, Richard Crenna's character, he finds in him sort of a bit of a surrogate father.
Mm-hmm.
Phil talks about, sort of gets him hyped on the whole selling cars thing. And Jeffrey's like, well, okay, actually I can do this. And if I can do this, I'll make enough money. I can live on my own and this kind of stuff. And then Phil tells him, like, I said I'd give you a job, so I need a stock boy. Now, that clearly upsets Jeffrey to the point that it puts a serious strain on their relationship and is basically, I don't want to say the straw that broke the camel's back because it wasn't like there was a bunch of straws leading up to this, but it is the thing that ends up making Jeffrey decide this guy isn't so rad after all. But that kind of concerned me because Richard Crenna was right.
Nobody is going to come into my showroom and buy a $10,000 foreign automobile from a kid who looks like he just got his driver's license. We all have to start someplace.
Secondly, you need to know this business.
Yeah, you can't just be up jump to being in charge when you are literally barely out of childhood.
Right. that so upsets him that then now that Jeffrey is now on this course to eventually sort of bring Phil down. And I thought that was just weird.
I hadn't thought of it because it is a hanging thread that just gets left off the garment, dangling in the dirt.
And he's clearly bitter about it, and he's got a bit of a vendetta because of it. But he's right.
Brody is right. That's correct. You do have to work your way into something when you're being given a shot because you didn't build it on your own.
Right.
It's not yours.
Right.
Jeff has this final line after he's defeated Brody at the gin table.
You can't go around screwing your friends, Mr. Brody.
As if Jeff had been cheated by Brody.
Right.
Which wasn't the case.
With the stock boy job.
Right. Those are good reversals. Maybe that's what the censors objected to. The movie still champions Jeff's cause.
Right.
All of that is present in this movie. And as I think back on my appetites with this thing, because again, I remember in town there being the first multiplex, a 6-piece, called The Carousel. And one of the movies that I remember being advertised with some kind of poster art near the marquee, near the big thoroughfare street that it was on, was The Flamingo Kid. This would have been Christmas time. December 1984 was when it drops. December 21st, to be exact.
Right.
And I was on vacation. Ooh, look at that cover, because if it's PG-13, I'm not 13 yet. Ooh, maybe I should go see that. You can feel, I was feeling the rise of certain appetites.
Yeah.
And this movie's going to teach me some things. It's going to be great. But of course, I'm rolling this back into what else was happening in that season. And I'm looking through it with the lenses of adulthood. Movies that were released in October that were still with us, still in theaters, still doing good business by the time Flamingo Kid lands, include things like Paris, Texas, the Wim Wenders movie.
Yeah.
The Terminator is still out there.
A childhood staple of mine, something I watched daily.
Which
multiple times a day after taping it off HBO.
A Nightmare on Elm Street is still in theaters. And that had a similar appeal to the Flamingo Kid because it was aimed squarely at teenagers. And then in November, we start to get prestige movies like The Killing Fields shows up. And then we get trash like Supergirl shows up. So those movies are in theaters. They're losing popularity by the time we enter December. But in December, we get Beverly Hills Cop, a movie I understood to be too violent and too profane for this kid to go see, but I wanted to badly, especially after my parents saw it and said it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We get the Eastwood Burt Reynolds movie City Heat. We get The Cotton Club, which I didn't want to see, but I have since seen. It's marvelous, although weird. We get Dune, which I did see, which was also PG-13, but was rated PG-13 after The Flamingo Kid had been rated many, many months before. We get 1984. We get A Passage to India. We get Runaway, Michael Crichton's science fiction movie with Gene Simmons in the background as the bad guy. We get Starman. We get The River, and we get Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Wait, which Gene Simmons? Gene Simmons from Kiss? Okay.
With Tom Selleck in the lead part. And more people are going to go see Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, yeah. From I didn't see Beverly Hills Cop until it, too, made HBO.
Yeah.
But I recall it being making a tremendous splash.
The Flamingo Kid should have been released in the summertime, when we would get a spate of these regionally specific, teen-organized and targeted movies, which are typical for that season, but instead it drops in this moment, where it's just an odd fish. I think even though that's the case, it did okay business, but then there's another note. Because it was released in late December, it rolls over into 1985, and here's a couple of things that show up in early 1985, in January. Blood Simple, The Falcon and the Snowman, Fandango, another nostalgic retelling of kids who grew up in the 50s and 60s.
And
then in February...
birthed Kevin Costner's career.
Right. And then in February we get Witness, The Breakfast Club, and Vision Quest.
Wow, crazy.
So those things sort of put a real notch or an exclamation point on the commercial potential of this movie. That was budgeted at a fair $10 million. I think a lot of that money, which was a fair amount for then, that would not be a crazy amount adjusting for inflation. It's maybe a $50 million movie today. And a lot of that, I think, is securing locations.
I was going to suggest the soundtrack.
Oh, license.
Yeah,
okay.
But although I think songs might have been cheaper back then.
But this movie earns an okay gross. My reporting is that it goes almost $24 million in North America. You do the usual rule of thumb about how much goes back to the producer and how much is kept in distribution and exhibition. It's possible that the producers of this movie, Michael Phillips, he and Julia Phillips earlier in the 70s had done The Sting together as a project before their eventual divorce. So he was involved with the Mamas and the Papas. He was a guy who had multiple entertainment things that he was involved with. I don't think he profited on this movie. He might have had a bit of a loss. It wasn't a terrible failure in the sense of being a complete bomb, but at most it probably just paid for itself.
Yeah, it just broke even. It certainly isn't something that I would have wanted to revisit the way I did, say, The Terminator. And so I wonder what the word of mouth was like at the time, and was this something that people were like loving, but just not enough people?
I don't recall
see it,
knowing
or...
anybody who saw it.
Yeah.
And I was, at this age, asking people, especially older people, especially teenagers sympathetic to my nerdy, glasses-wearing, parted hair, pre-braces self,
right,
saying, hey, was this good? I don't remember an opinion coming one way or the other. So this eventually gets swallowed up in the Leonard Maltin Guide, which I had several copies of over the years, where it's got his little star rating, and you always are secretly holding this flame. Ooh, there must be exposed breasts, or maybe I'll learn how intercourse works, or whatever, because it was PG-13.
Right.
So I guess to close out part of the conversation concerning ratings, because that's our purpose here, I'm thinking that this producer, Michael Phillips, reading the tea leaves of early 1984, seeing how the MPAA was adjusting because of public pressure, was recognizing maybe it's to our benefit if we get this movie called out for being something far worse than it actually is. Maybe that will actually increase our box office potential.
Right.
In this example, it did not work out that way. This is still an affirmative story about this 18-year-old kid who wants to come of age. One detail that sits with me well. Jeffrey wears around his neck his father's dog tags.
Right.
I assume that's from Army service during the war years.
Korea, right? Or World War II, would it have been?
I think it would have been World War II.
Okay.
And so we don't go into that. There is no, my dad was at Guadalcanal. That's not part of the situation. Right. But he wears the old man's dog tags. That has a couple of small, detailed points of reference in the course of the movie. One, when Jeffrey and the gang go up to the racetrack and they lose big, they go to salve their wound afterwards by having fast food where they meet this other gang and they rumble. One of those gang members yanks off the dog tags, and that initiates the fight. Later, when Jeffrey's trying to move out of his house and he has a fight with his father, Arthur has just slapped him in the car because Jeffrey's been terribly insulting about their home. Arthur's trying to apologize. Arthur goes into the room and sees his dog tags. They're now on the top of a cupboard. Mm. It's no longer something Jeffrey treasures.
Right.
Because this is 18 years after the close of that war. Presumably Jeffrey was conceived either on break when his father was on leave, or potentially after his father had left the war service. Yeah. Maybe he did his stand-in or was injured. It's never made plain. And that very small ambiguity in an otherwise very clear movie is a nice touch.
Yeah. Yeah.
My parents were just slightly younger than this character is meant to be. And I can't help but feel that some of their striving, because both my parents came from really impoverished, my grandparents were very impoverished people, having been raised during the Depression, and were able to become strivers in the post-war years, partly based on their wartime service. And they were able to offer their children far more than they ever had when they were young. And, of course, that's Arthur's whole goal.
Right.
All of that churning in the background, it pleases me to think about my family and families like them. Another detail. I think that a certain sensitive viewer would say, well, the reason this movie's PG-13 is we're simply asked, as we were discussing earlier, we're asked to ogle a lot of female flesh in bikinis and swimsuits.
Sure.
Yes. But we do a fair amount of deconstructing the male body. And we do this with Mr. Brody.
Yeah, and Big Sal.
Those hairy nipples on that guy. Well, thinking about Mr. Brody in particular, we realize that Brody and Arthur are of a similar generation, and they would be roughly in their middle 40s, maybe they're 50. Let's just say that for argument's sake.
Yeah.
Mr. Brody is vain. Mr. Brody is constantly doing body work. He's going to the steam room.
He's wearing a girdle.
He's wearing a girdle. He dresses and undresses, and we see this in contrast to Jeffrey, who's a very fit, handsome young person played by Matt Dillon, who's frequently without his shirt on, or is in his tight-fitting clothes as a steward to this beach resort, and we see contrasted with the flowing garb of Mr. Brody, not falling apart, but he's not the young buck. And we're big into male gaze and film studies. We're hip to the way the camera looks at body parts and fetishizes things. Yet this movie fetishizes negative parts of the male body, while it's also saying, Janet Jones has a really long athletic body. She's very tan. Isn't she capable of diving into a pool?
Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of interesting. Even, I try to keep in shape. The two comment on each other, sort of their in a massage room. There's a part where they sort of flip over on their back, and I expected, Phil to be like, "Oh, that flip over. It's time for him to finish you off." That's what we call the happy ending.
This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks, a conversation between Garrett Chaffin-Quiray and
Ed Rosa.
Boop boobity doo.